Now, in other big news we're following for you today, guys, it's been widely expected, and Ottawa has now confirmed that all COVID-19 border measures are being lifted. That's effective as of Saturday. This means mandatory masking, testing, quarantine, and isolation requirements, they'll be gone. The controversial ArriveCan app becomes optional as well. Here's part of today's announcement.
Based on the data accumulated over the last few weeks and months, we are announcing that the Government of Canada will not renew the order in Council that expires on September the 30th and will therefore remove all COVID-19 border requirements for all travellers entering Canada. This includes the removal of all federal testing, quarantine and isolation requirements, as well as the mandatory submission of health information in ArriveCan.
CBC's Janice McGregor was listening in on the announcement. She joins us now from Ottawa. So Janice, why is this happening now?
Well, it's interesting, Natasha. Federal Liberals have always maintained that they would make the call on this based on science. And you heard the Health Minister, Jean-Yves Duclos, there talking about how it was recent data, accumulated data, over the last few weeks that drove this decision. He said to reporters today that based on, what science is saying about new variants and how variants from travelers are no longer having an effect on the way that the COVID virus is evolving domestically in this country, that was why they felt like they could lift these restrictions. But unlike recent statements from the U.S. government, for example, I think we saw politicians and officials today take pretty great care to emphasize that they do not think this pandemic is over. It was interesting. The first person they asked to speak was Deputy Chief Public Health Officer Howard New. He said, look, COVID cases are going to go up this fall. He encouraged people to keep masking, to keep making sure that their vaccinations are up to date. But as of Saturday, you're no longer going to be forced to do those things if you want to cross a border or board a plane or board a train or even board a cruise ship. That was something else that wasn't originally kind of reported about this. The cruise ship rules also lifting here, including, quarantine rules as well for incoming travelers. And as you mentioned, the mobile app that was mandatory previously, ArriveCan, now becoming optional, but it is still hanging around. Officials believe that it has been helpful to reduce lineups, for example. Some people, though, wondering if its raison d'etre, which was originally supposed to be to help you upload your vaccination and your COVID test information, if that goes away, is this mission creep? Are they starting to use this app, beyond what it was originally intended for? That's something to watch. Also, they said fines for people who refused to use the app and tried to cross will not necessarily be waived. They said that's a decision that hasn't been made yet by the Justice Department. The other thing to note, Duclos today was talking about the importance of moving away from a coercive environment, and that was part of the justification here, acknowledging that, like air crews, for example, we're having to bear the brunt in terms of enforcing those rules. And so that, was a pressure that they were mindful of. But I think we also have to acknowledge there'd be political pressures here on the government to do this. They waited until the end of the summer travel season before they did this. That was a great disappointment to border communities, also to the travel and hospitality industry that really thought that politicians could have found reason to do this much sooner.
About travel on the other side for U.S. cross-border travelers, how are those being affected?
Yeah, we don't exactly have a border that is like it was in the before times yet, because the Americans have not yet lifted their vaccination requirement. Now, apparently, we're hearing U.S. officials don't always ask for this consistently, so it's maybe a rule more in fact than in practice. But you do still, if you're flying to the States, have to attest that you're vaccinated. Officials, if you go to secondary inspection, could still ask to see your proof of vaccination. We have not heard yet anything from the U.S. About lifting that rule. So that is something to watch, and another interesting space to consider politically as well, because, earlier in the pandemic, they were careful to move in tandem. Now they have parted company.
CBC's Janice McGregor in Ottawa. Thank you, Janice.
You're welcome.